The lore and story of Elden Ring can be confusing, to say the least. In most of Miyazaki's games, the primary director of Elden Ring, you take control of a nameless character in a dead or dying fantasy world where the most interesting and pivotal events have occurred hundreds to thousands of years prior to your character's arrival. The story is told through missable cryptic dialogue, vague cutscenes, and the actions you as a player take in-game. Meanwhile, the world's lore and history is found through various item descriptions scattered throughout the game map, or through the visual storytelling of the environments. Even if you dissected every in-game item with your telescope, talked to every NPC, played the game multiple times, and read every item's description, you still probably don't have a clear picture of what is going on. Luckily for us though, Elden Ring has provided the tools in-game for near-complete understanding of the lore and story. All we have to do is know what those tools are and learn how to use them. In this video, I'll go over 2 pieces of in-game knowledge you need to fully understand anything about the Elden Ring story and lore. And by the end of this, you too will be able to craft your own theories and be a certified lore hunter. To get the basics out of the way, we have some legwork to do, which requires us compiling all of our puzzle pieces. That includes, but is not limited to, playing the game multiple times, seeing every single ending, doing every quest and their multiple endings, reading every item description, and inspecting every decrepit ruined castle with your telescope. No stone can be left unturned. But once you have all this information, like who killed who had what powers, and where they got those powers, how are you supposed to make sense of it all? The answer is found in 2 Golden Order fundamentalist spells, which are both described as key fundamentals in their in-game text: the Law of Regression and the Law of Causality. Law of Regression reads, "Regression is the pull of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge," while the Law of Causality reads, "Causality is the pull between meanings, that which links all things in a chain of relation." Knowing those item descriptions isn't enough. We have to understand what they mean and why they are present in the game. And to do that, we need to take a little detour. First, we will look at what these concepts are in real-world mathematics, how they relate to the co-author of Elden Ring's storytelling, their main source of inspiration for their inclusion within the game, how we can know if this interpretation is correct, an example of these methods in practice in crafting a theory. Without further ado, let's jump in. Causality and regression are 2 concepts that are used in statistical analysis to determine how different variables are affected or unaffected by each other. Causality is defined as a clear cause-effect relationship between 2 variables. Simply, there is causation when action A causes outcome B. For example, if I stub my toe and then my toe hurts, that is causality. The stubbing of my toe caused the effect of my toe hurting. If I press a button on my controller and the character on screen swings their sword, then that is causality. The pressing of the button caused the effect of my character's sword swing. The philosopher John Stuart Mill's criteria for inferring causality is thus: 1. The cause must precede the effect in time. A must happen before B. 2. The cause and effect are correlated with one another. There must be relation between A and B. And 3. The correlation between the 2 must have limited influence of a third variable that causes the 2 under consideration, i.e., influence from co-founding variables C, D, E, etc. should be limited. It is important to note that correlation does not equal causation. Correlation is the connection or relationship between 2 or more things, while causality is the cause-effect relationship between 2 things. Our other concept is regression. Regression is defined as a return to a former or less developed state, or a measure of the relation between the mean value of one variable and the corresponding values of other variables. You know the output of something, but you want to find the time and cost required for that output. If there is a causal relation between 2 variables, a regression analysis can predict one variable. For example, if you are interested in finding what influenced a person's salary, you could look at their level of education, how much they worked each week, and how old they were. You already know the outcome, the person's salary, but you want to find what the causality of that outcome is. I think you see where we're going with this, but you still might not be convinced at how important these concepts are to Elden Ring. We still have to continue this detour, but instead of math, we get to talk about the other guy who wrote Elden Ring, George R.R. Martin.
What the fans have to keep in mind, and I hate to say this because I don't want to sound like I'm attacking the fans. I love the fans. I'm a fan myself of many of these franchises. But we're making this shit up.
Archmaester Rigney once wrote that history is a wheel, for the nature of man is fundamentally unchanging. What has happened before will perforce happen again, he said. George R. R. Martin needs no introduction, but if you're unfamiliar, he is the acclaimed author of A Song of Ice and Fire, which the HBO shows Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are adaptations of. He was contacted by From Software a number of years ago to create the world that Elden Ring would eventually take place in. In Martin's own words,
people from Software, the makers of Elden Ring, contacted me a number of years ago, and they wanted to do this video game, and they wanted a world built. They wanted the world building, which I'm, been doing for quite a while, and I like doing it. But they made it clear that Elden Ring was going to take place in, let's say, the present of their game universe. But what they wanted me to write was what happened like 5,000 years before that totally screwed up the world so that the present was really messed up. So I went back and wrote, a history of what happened 5,000 years before the current game and who all the characters were and who was killing each other and what powers they had. They had these runes that were the center of the game, and the rune got split into many pieces and runes, and that's what screwed up the world. So I laid all that out.
Essentially, he built the world of Elden Ring, from the entirety of the game's fictional history to who each major character was and what they did, up until the present day of the game, cultivating in the story we play through as presented and edited by Miyazaki and his team. Knowing how George R. R. Martin writes his stories and the technique he uses to facilitate his storytelling can help us understand the story of Elden Ring in a major way. One of those techniques is presenting the reader with an in-universe history and folklore that foreshadows and parallels the primary story. One of the mostly confirmed instances of this occurring in A Song of Ice and Fire is the event known as the Dance of the Dragons, found throughout the main series of books and in the prequel book Fire and Blood, of which the show House of the Dragon is an adaptation of. The dance boils down to a succession war within the Targaryen family that inevitably leads to the extinction of dragons in the present-day story. In the fifth and latest book, A Dance with Dragons, not to be confused with The Dance of the Dragons, we start to see the beginnings of a possible clash between two potential successors to the Targaryen royal line. In 2003, before the release of the fourth novel, a fan asked Martin, "Will we find out more about the Dance of the Dragons in the future books?" Martin responded, "The first answer the second. The second will be the subject of a book. The first one will be mentioned from time to time, I'm sure." Since then, the parallels between the origins, the event itself, and the aftermath of the first Dance of the Dragons has been deeply analyzed and compared to the primary story to further our understanding and attempting to uncover what is being foreshadowed, trying to find the causality within the fictional historical event to predict what will happen in the main narrative. Since Elden Ring is an open-world video game, we don't necessarily get told the history of the lands between in a traditional sense, and when we do, it isn't always direct what the implications can be. With exploration, however, we can walk through the history of the game's world and do our own archaeological expedition to figure out what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. Have you ever seen the arms of House Tolland of Ghost Hill? He had to think a moment. A dragon eating its own tail? The dragon is time. It has no beginning and no ending. So all things come round again.
In this world, is the destiny of mankind controlled by some transcendental entity or law? Is it like the hand of God hovering above? At least it is true that man has no control, even over his own will.
Berserk is a long-running, critically acclaimed manga written and illustrated by the late Kentaro Miura, and one of the most apparent artistic influences on Miyazaki's work. There are many artistic allusions to Berserk within Elden Ring. However, for our case, we'll be looking at one specific influence that Berserk has had in the philosophy of Elden Ring: causality. Berserk follows the life from birth to present of the traveling black swordsman Guts, showcasing his journey of loss, revenge, and healing. The major antagonists of the story, known as the God Hand, have been manipulating human history in order to cause death and destruction in order to achieve some unknown goal. During the climactic eclipse, the Mastermind, with a literal mastermind, Void, tells us everything up until this point has been planned through causality. All lies within the currents of causality. Everything has been determined. All of your lives have been spun into this sacred point in time, the eclipse. Throughout the manga, we see subtle examples of the God Hand's influence on the events, but what is important is the explicit nature that causality is present within Berserk. In a conversation between Guts and the enigmatic Skull Knight describes causality as thus. Unfortunately, there's no way for man to change the course of this festival. This world is as moonlight reflected on the water's surface. The moon's light will not be extinguished. So long as the moon exists in the sky, moonlight will remain on the water. And this is a thing which already was. This is a poetic way to explain causality. The cause is light reflecting off of the moon, and the effect is moonlight being cast on the water below. In this analogy, the effect cannot be prevented because the cause cannot be changed. In the context of the story, man is deemed helpless to change the outcome of causality. He is a victim of fate. We already subsist within the currents of causality. We who exist beyond the physical are still merely shadows on the water. What makes our protagonist Guts special, however, is that although besieged with tragedy and hardship, he continues to resist the currents of causality. In one instance, Skull Knight describes him as a leaping fish. Either way, the leaping of one fish would never disturb the flow of the river. Maybe you aren't a shadow on the water, but instead a fish that breaches the water's surface. While Guts cannot change the flow of causality, or stop the moon from casting moonlight onto the water, a fish that breaches the water causes ripples, and the reflection changes. The course of the river wavers ever so slightly. Causality cannot be fought. A cause will always have an effect. But through willpower and determination, that effect can be altered. Also within Berserk, we see parallels between the past and the present. Clear allusions that what is happening now to our protagonists has happened similarly before, and that our main antagonist, the God Hand, have been manipulating causality repeatedly. In a conversation between Skull Knight and Flora the Witch, we see why our author does this. People may appear to repeat the same mistakes, but causality is by no means a circle. Indeed, it is a spiral. Those children are not bound to choose the same paths you and I did. Note, if you have the Dark Horse printing, causality is mistranslated as karma. Causality being a spiral and not a circle shows that although history may repeat itself, the people experiencing history do not have to, and this spiral is ever present in Berserk. From the brand of sacrifice, to the icon of the Holy Sea, the idea of evil in the Cut chapter, and the World Tree. With this observation, we can now return to Elden Ring and look at the spiral of causality and regression. We finally made it back to Elden Ring, and I hope I was able to give a clear understanding of what causality and regression are. But can we confirm that this interpretation of these concepts is present in the game? Remember, in Berserk, causality was described as a spiral. Well, that spiral is ever present within Elden Ring. If we look at some significant lore items in the game, we will find this spiral. From the ancient Elden Ring icon in Malekith's boss room in Farum Azula, to Miquella's completed needle, the spiral shard we are awarded at the end of Selen's quest, the icon on the Elden Stars incantation, whose item description marks the arrival of the Elden Ring and Elden Beast, the Fingerslayer blade found during Ranni's questline, the sacred relic blade that was born from Radagon's corpse, the Godslayer greatsword with which the god-slaying Black Flame was channeled through, the golden halberd of the Tree Sentinels, the Prince of Death's staff found in Deeproot Depths, the Carian Regal scepter from Renala's remembrance, the Cross Tree Greatshield purchased from a nomadic merchant, the unalloyed braids of Melania's helmet, to the braids on Miquella's head, and I bet a few more items in game that I have overlooked. With what we know now, I think it is clear that causality, and by extension, regression, plays a clear role within the game outside of just 2 incantation, and that the visual symbolism found in game parallels the symbolism found in Berserk. We also learn that George R. R. Martin, the co-author of Elden Ring's world, likes to implement foreshadowing via his world building by crafting a history which will repeat itself. And by looking at real-world application of these concepts and statistics, we now understand what causality and regression mean and how to practically use them. But now that we know all of this, and that is significant within the game, how do we use this to understand lore? First, their in-game descriptions again. Law of causality reads, "Causality is the pull between meanings, that which links all things in a chain of relation." All things within the game are linked by a chain of relations. Nothing is included for no reason. There is a purposeful cause and effect, each a link in the chain. Law of regression reads, "Regression is the pull of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge." History wishes to repeat itself, and with regression analysis, we can find the patterns of cause and effect, improving our understanding of events by following the links in the chain backwards. So although the lore and story may be confusing or not entirely clear, if we look closely and attempt to figure the meaning for something's inclusion, then we can uncover where it fits in the chain of relations, in the flow of causality. Sometimes we don't have the cause, we just have the effect. So with regression, we can look at what we know and work backwards to find at least one variable in the cause-effect relationship. So taking what we have learned, let's try to craft a theory. We're going to start off strong and look at one of the most significant events in the game's lore, but one that is shrouded in much mystery. Why was Godwyn the Golden a target of the Black Knife assassins? When trying to craft this theory, we'll be only using information that we can find explicitly in-game, meaning just dialogue, item descriptions, and environmental assets to attempt to infer meaning from their inclusion, and if their inclusion is relevant to causality within the narrative. To understand the whole picture, we would have to look at both major variables involved, the assassins and their victims, but to keep it simple, we're just going to be looking at the primary victim. In the future, I may post a video discussing the whole event, but for now, we will keep it as simple as we can. First, let's look at what we know with absolute certainty about Godwyn before his death. Godwyn the Golden was the child of Lord Godfrey and Queen Marika, making him part of the Golden lineage. In the War of the Dragons, Godwyn was able to befriend the ancient dragon Fortisax, and this event led to the creation of the ancient dragon cult within the Erdtree capital. Godwyn was the first of the demigods to die, with his death occurring during the Night of the Black Knives. So all we really know about Godwyn is his parentage, his major life achievement, and his death, as well as his soulless life post-death, but that isn't relevant for this instance. For Godwyn's parentage, we know that he is the child of Queen Marika and her consort Lord Godfrey. He is given the title the Golden, tying him to the Golden lineage, as well as his golden blonde hair, and also indicating that he may have been the Golden Child, which is used to describe someone who is regarded as exceptional or the favorite. Could Godwyn have been an assassination target because he was the favorite child of Godfrey and Marika? He could have been, but can we really infer causality from this? With the information we have, I don't think we can, so we need to move on. For Godwyn's death, we have dialogue from the finger reader crone in the Deepwood Depths.
Lord Godwyn. Oh, my poor sweet lordling should have died a true death. A scion of the Golden Bough, sentenced to live in death. How could such a thing come to be? Oh.
From this dialogue, we know that there was a mistake in Godwyn's death, that as the first demigod to die, he should have been a martyr for destined death and die a true death. This dialogue also confirms his golden lineage. Godwyn being referred to as a martyr for destined death could have major implications to the nature of his assassination. Causality could be involved if we know more about why martyr was the choice word. Unfortunately, there isn't any more data within the game that expands on this, so we need to move on again. Lastly, we have Godwyn's involvement in the creation of the ancient dragon cult. Let's look at a timeline of the events based on item descriptions in-game that lead to the founding of the ancient dragon cult. Bolt of Grandsex. A great ancient dragon, Grandsex once rained calamity upon the royal capital. The only time in historical record that Leyendel's walls have fallen. This marked the dawn of the war against dragons. Sword Monument on Altus Plateau. The routing of the ancient dragons. Godwyn the Golden fought to the last, earning the friendship of Dread Fortissax. Lightning Spear. Long ago, Godwyn the Golden defeated the ancient dragon Fortissax and befriended his fallen foe, an event that gave rise to the ancient dragon cult in the capital. Lansseax Glaive. Lansseax was the sister of Fortissax. It is said that she took the form of a human to commune with the knights as a priestess of the ancient dragon cult. Gravelstone Seal. Sacred seal made from gravelstone, thought to be an ancient dragon scale. The worship of ancient dragons does not conflict with belief in the Erdtree. After all, this seal and lightning itself are both imbued with gold. So we have Godwyn's influence in the creation of the dragon cult, and how the dragon cult spread within the capital's military, as well as justification for its existence within the dominant Erdtree culture. Could all of this have made him a target for the Black Knife Assassins? We need to dig deeper. Crumbling Farum Azula is a sacred site home to many ancient dragons, Stormhawks, and the Dragon Lord himself, and is a prime place for us to look for hints about the dragon cult. Two items really jump out at me. The Ancient Dragon Prayer Book, which reads, Prayer Book of the Capital's Ancient Dragon Cult, a lost tome that never reached the lands between, contains red lightning incantations. And from this prayer book we can learn the spell Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike, a secret incantation of the capital's ancient dragon cult. Summon a red bolt of lightning that scatters and spreads around the surrounding area. Spoken of in legend, red lightning is the weapon wielded by the ancient dragons. And with that, I think we have the linchpin for causality in our theory. A prayer book of the capital's ancient dragon cult that contains secret incantations of red and not gold. If the worship of the ancient dragons was permissible because of lightning's connection to gold, what could the fact that the red lightning incantations were said to be secret imply? We have seen how the Erdtree Empire treated the red-haired fire giants, so could red lightning be similarly disdained? Could the cause of red lightning worship had the effect of assassination? We can't say for certain yet, but if we look closer at the ancient dragons, the Erdtree Empire, and the motives and connections between the Black Knife Assassins, we may be able to come up with a great theory. I hope this video was able to give you an understanding of how to work through Elden Ring's lore, and that using causality and regression to break down the events within the game is all you really need to make your own theories. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as well as sharing with a friend. I have a few more typical lore videos in the works that I think you might enjoy if you thought this thought process was interesting. My next video will be looking at Rennala and what truly led the Carian Queen to grieve. Until next time, let's do the thing.
Living my dream right now, it's weird as it seems, but people who don't love a beat enough to know what I mean. Grew up a part of the first MCs where I'm